Hello, here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you virtually. At the moment, I'm in London, England. I'm going to try sharing my screen now and going to PowerPoint. And can you see my talk? How's that? I don't know if you can see the screen. So it's great that you are doing this work, creating this registry, which will enable you to obtain data that medics can't otherwise find. I started with registries when I first started practicing ocular oncology in 1984. And one of the first things that happened to me was that I was accused of being a murderer, because at that time, everybody was just removing eyes with eyes of patients with severe melanoma, because it was believed that that was the only way to save life. But thanks to registries and research, everything has changed. So I first created the registry with this small computer here, and I used to fill in forms at the end of each day. And then I found it was too much work. And I learned that everything has to fit in with daily life in order to last a long time and to work well. And then in 1988, a patient of mine gave me a large donation, and I was able to create a very large registry in Liverpool. And so I got a data manager, secretary, and now we have data in that registry with several thousand patients. So you need a lot of patients to do a lot of research. And the more patients you have, the more opportunities you have. And research produces data, data produces knowledge, and knowledge changes practice. Thanks to the registry that we had, that we still have, we're able to do research and to find that eccentric plaque placement in killing the tumor without destroying vision in many cases like this. It looks as if the tumor's been missed, but it hasn't. And the research to treat iris melanomas with radiotherapy instead of iridectomy. And the research that we did enabled us to do big eyewall resections and endoresections. Very controversial, but our data have shown that, that you can save the eye without sacrificing life. But the data must be complete and correct for the results to be meaningful and reliable. A very important factor with regards to registries is that they have to be legal. And I note that you've got hopes of expanding internationally. And if you're going to incorporate patients from Europe, then sooner or later it'll be necessary to comply with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which has lots of very strict rules and which also gives patients a lot of very special rights to see their own data, to correct any errors, to remove data that they don't like, to restrict the use of their own data, and so on. That's really important to be aware of the regulations in the parts of the world where you're going to work. So registries can enable quality evaluation. Many years ago, we did the study on about 2,500 patients that I had seen. And we found that about a quarter of all patients with symptomatic tumors had their tumor missed when they first presented. And the chances of saving the eye and vision was much lower in those patients than in the other patients. So data can improve the quality of care by highlighting shortcomings in clinical practice. And one way to really improve outcomes is to improve detection, and that needs a change in practice. Another use of registries and data is to help with decision making. When we have a dilemma, should we give radiotherapy or should we remove the eye? Are we trying too hard to save eyes and causing lots of complications and side effects? Or are we not trying hard enough and so sacrificing eyes unnecessarily when we could have saved them with good vision? And this was a study I did on about 1,500 patients a long time ago. And what we want to see here is a steep drop, which is the primary enucleation, and the curves indicate secondary enucleations. And if we've got things about right, then these curves are very slight and these lines are horizontal. And this gave me reassurance that we had the balance about right. We weren't trying too hard, but we were trying hard enough. Then there's uveal melanoma genetics. In 1999, nobody was doing genetic analysis of uveal melanomas. As far as I knew, there was a study in Germany which showed that metastatic disease occurred almost exclusively in patients with uveal melanomas that showed chromosome 3 loss. And so I got funding to type uveal melanomas and to provide genetic typing as a routine clinical service. But we had to evaluate it to make sure it worked, and we had to develop better techniques and see if those worked. And now, thanks to our experience and the experience of others, this has become routine, not just in Liverpool, but all around the world. And the data on well over 4,000 patients has enabled us in Liverpool, where I worked for 20 years, and I'm still associated there, to develop this prognostic tool online, which predicts metastatic disease very accurately, also taking account age and gender of the patient and the normal life expectancy. This is your press release from a few days ago, and I'm grateful to Jack O'Dell for drawing my attention to this. And the emphasis is on patient-reported outcomes and quality of life. And you as patients are extremely well placed to show us the way. So I'd like to show you what we did several years ago in Liverpool when we did an analysis on about 1,500 patients from England. And we did this using a questionnaire specifically designed for ocular tumors by the European Ocular Oncology Group many, many years ago. And this is the kind of result that we got. In the left-hand column, there's the results of enucleation. And on the right-hand column is radiotherapy. And this shows difficulty reading. And down below, there's very few patients who had difficulty reading whatever kind of treatment they had. And the horizontal lines here show the change over the first 10 post-operative years. The continuous line is enucleation, and the dashed line is radiotherapy. And there's not very much difference between the two. So we're able to understand our patients much better thanks to this kind of study, and to let patients know not just how the eye will do after our treatment, but how they will feel and what difficulties they might experience, what challenges that they'll overcome after the treatment. For instance, difficulty driving in daytime, not much difference. Difficulty at night is more of a problem, especially with enucleation. Difficulty with depth perception, worse after removing an eye, of course. But then with radiotherapy, the vision gets worse over many years, and so it catches up. Difficulty with judging distance when you're negotiating steps, on uneven ground. Loss of visual field is worse after removal of an eye. And so patients who have an eye removed have are more likely to restrict their vision, their activities in some way. There's also more discharge after nucleation, more watering, no difference in ocular pain, not much difference with headaches. With regards to metastatic disease, it's a little bit worse after a nucleation, but that's because patients who've had the eye removed usually have bigger tumors, and so a slightly worse prognosis. Patients with radiotherapy are more worried about tumor coming back in the eye than patients who've had the eye removed, because of course there isn't an eye in which the eye where the tumor can recur. But there's still quite a few patients who, after nucleation, who are worried that the tumor will come back behind the artificial eye. And so that teaches us that we need to keep reassuring them that it's extremely rare for that to happen. Worries about appearance. It's not very many patients are worried about appearance. There's a slight difference there. What about well-being? Well, not much difference in physical well-being, which is very good. Emotional well-being, not as good, but quite good. Social well-being, very good. Functional well-being, good. There isn't all that much difference. And that's very reassuring, because when patients aren't sure what their life is going to be like after having an eye removed, we can reassure them that they'll recover, they'll adjust, and they'll enjoy life. And here's a graph comparing our quality of life results in patients who've had removal of the eye or radiotherapy compared to the general population. And it's within the normal range. There's a slight dip with emotional well-being, which is affected by fears about dying. And that's a bit worse in patients with monosomy 3 melanoma, because patients have been given a worse prognosis, and so understandably they're more worried about that. And fear of metastasis is understandably greater after removal of a tumor or radiotherapy for a monosomy 3 melanoma. But with regards, despite all these things, despite the discharge, discomfort, visual difficulties, the self-reported quality of life is very good. And it's good for patients to know that, especially when they first present. There are some patients who have a reduced quality of life, but this graph shows that it's not because of their eye, but because of other factors. And the other factors are poor social support, unemployment, and perhaps financial difficulties, poor general health unrelated to their eye. No difference between radiotherapy and enucleation. So this teaches us that we need to manage patients holistically, not just treating the tumor, but also looking after the rest of them. Then there's other things that can be done with registries. Really important, something I'm really concerned about, is local tumor control. Now, when you read the journals from centers of excellence, you get excellent results. But a lot of patients are treated in smaller cities where there's fewer patients and less experience. And so we need to, not just in centers of excellence, but everywhere. And we need to know whether tumor recurrence is life-threatening or not. And that requires lots of patients followed up for many years. And that's a very important study that needs to be done. So in conclusion, there's great opportunities here for producing data that others can't reach. And you've got a great potential for enhancing patient care, not only in the US, but all around the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Damato. We're welcoming Afshar to the stage. Thank you, and go ahead.
Great, thank you, everybody. So thank you very much for the privilege to speak today. So I'd like to talk to you today about the very exciting Insight Ocular Melanoma Registry, and I'm going to attempt to share our slides here. Great, and hopefully you can all see our PowerPoints here. So ocular melanoma, as we all know, is quite a rare disease. Posterior uveal melanoma, really it's about 5 to 6 people per million in the population per year. So this is not an extremely common disorder, but one that has touched all of us equally. And so Dr. Damato very nicely framed the importance of registries, and just want to hit in a few of them here. They're critical in assessing treatments and outcomes for different conditions. They're really exceptionally helpful for quality improvement efforts, very useful for research and innovation, and also, as Dr. Damato very nicely pointed out, there really is power in big data, especially with rare diseases like this. So the Insight Global Ocular Melanoma Registry is a collaborative effort with the Cure Insight, the National Organization of Rare Disorders, or NORD, as well as University of California at San Francisco, UCSF. The website address for this is insight.imrare.org. This is a very dynamic, participant-driven resource that can really empower and unite the ocular melanoma community through shared knowledge. And really want to acknowledge the immense efforts of Melody Kling, ACIS, Kristin Gygi, NORD, and all that were involved in the development of this platform. So the goals of the Insight Patient Registry are to, first off, provide a convenient online platform for patients or family members, legally authorized representatives of patients with ocular melanoma to participate. It provides the means to collect, store, and retrieve data for analytics and research studies. We're hoping this will allow us to characterize the ocular melanoma population as a whole, both within the United States and internationally. We do hope this will provide a more in-depth understanding of ocular melanoma progression over time. Another goal is to assist the ocular melanoma community with the development of recommendations for standards of care, to assist researchers in studying the pathophysiology of ocular melanoma, and lastly, to support the design of clinical trials for new ocular melanoma treatments. So what kinds of data are collected? Patient socio-demographic information, medical and diagnostic information, information on treatment and disease progression, management of care, and rather importantly, quality of life data. So patient-reported outcomes regarding the health and well-being of their eye, any anxiety or depression, and general well-being. So Insight is off to a great start so far. So this was just recently rolled out, and we already have had 160 new respondents in various stages of completion of their surveys. And so far, so good. So we do highly encourage all of you to check it out. Again, want to just highlight the address here. It is insight.imrare.org. And we look forward to increasing enrollment and collating our data and being able to share it with the ocular melanoma community. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and would like to either hand off the next speaker or open the floor to any questions.
Okay, we are now excited to welcome Kristin Gygi to the stage. Kristin, just click yes on the prompt to become a speaker. And as for the Q&A Dr. Afshar mentioned, we'll get to that at the end of the presentation. So pop your questions in as you think of them. All right, off to you, Kristin Gygi.
All right. Okay, I'm going to share my screen as well. Thank you for inviting me as well. I do have a little bit of probably duplicate information from what was just said, but I work for NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about NORD. Many of you probably have heard of it. About a little bit over 37 years ago, a handful of people got together to actually work Drug Act. So that was the beginning, and it combined people from a lot of different places. And we continue to this day to have a variety of stakeholders. So we're still paying attention to regulations on both the federal and local levels. We have sort of a mentorship program for patient organizations. The site is a member of NORD, and we offer a lot of resources. All of these different people we interact with, and of course, we offer a lot of resources for patients and families. So one of the stakeholders that actually was the beginning of the founder of NORD was the FDA, and we've had a strong relationship with the FDA for several years now. And a few years ago, NORD said to the FDA, what can we do to help promote research in the rare disease space? And the FDA says we need natural history data. And so NORD started looking into this, what sort of registries exist, and they didn't find anything that really felt like they covered what was needed. And so NORD got into the registry business, and we developed a platform. So we talked a little bit about registries. In the patient world, we basically have contact registries or patient registries, and patient registries can be medical data that's physician entered or patient reported. So the NORD registry platform is specifically for patient reported outcomes. It does also serve as a contact registry. Sometimes you'll see a registry that is sponsored by an academic institution, and this is really useful, but there is also a risk that if a researcher loses their funding or moves to another location, all of that data sometimes can be lost. So the benefit of having a patient organization in charge of the data means that they can decide what to do with it and have access to it over a long time. So natural history study data specifically is to study the disease over time, as was already mentioned. And we're looking to define the patient population, understand the patient population, understand how the disease affects them. So the natural history study part of our registry platform is specifically designed to offer you the opportunity to tell your story and enter data at regular time points. So you come in and take your surveys, and some of the surveys will be available in the future at regular time points, so you can report on the progress of the disease over time. And our primary model is working with patient organizations. So again, the patient organization will have access to the data, will own the data, will be able to work with a variety of different researchers or possibly industry, work with clinicians, and they can ensure the longevity of the availability of the data. And of course, when you join the registry, you also have immediate access to the identified aggregate data as soon as you take a survey. So just to speak a little bit about the Imr Platform. Again, this was designed and built at NORD. It's owned by NORD. And it is specifically designed to capture a variety of different types of diseases. It's a flexible platform. A patient can enroll and report on their own disease, but it's also available if a patient is too young to have an account. They can have a parent or a guardian report on their behalf. And again, it does have the ability to capture, we call it longitudinal data, so you'll have to be asked to come back and enter data at different time points on certain subjects. And here's a little quick history snapshot. So the very first registry was launched in 2014. This was actually before I was at NORD. I came and write about it in the middle of this timeline. And in 2015, NORD got into a cooperative agreement with the FDA to launch 20 more registries. Those awardees were the application process, and the awardee selection happened in 2016, and the first registries of that group were launched in 2016. In 2017, we started our registry community meetings. So we have different organizations that sponsor registries, and we like to bring them together on a regular basis. So there's a collaborative effort on that. People can share ideas and helpful hints. In 2018, the research team visited the FDA to sort of give an update, status report. This is where we've come in the last 4 years, and this is where we'd like to go. And that did actually result in some federally funded projects that began last year. So we are using the registry in collaboration with the FDA to kind of expand our research. Last year, we also celebrated the 5th anniversary of the program. And one of the federally funded programs is the RDCA GAP, Rare Disease Cures Accelerated and Data. Oh gosh, I'm not going to remember what it is. But you can read more about it on our website if you're interested. And earlier this year, we launched a registry for the undiagnosed community, as well as a film site. So some quick statistics since 2014. We have 25 live registries currently that are collecting data, and we have about 15 other groups that are in some stage of development. Among those registries, we've got over 11,000 participants enrolled, and we just hit up to 107,000 survey submissions. So what are some of our groups doing with the data? Many of our sponsors are presenting data at a number of different types of conferences. Of course, now everybody's going virtual this year. One of our groups, at least one of our groups, maybe more, have done patient-focused drug development meetings with the FDA, and they've been able to use the registry data for those to support their efforts there. There have been a number of articles published in different types of publications, and then posters presented. This picture here shows a picture of our NORD Summit last year. This is 2 of our groups who shared posters at that event. And then community reports and research collaborations. And last year, excuse me, the Power of Patients book was published. This is actually a coffee table book that was a collaboration between NORD and Trio Health. And the book combines patient experience with patient-reported data from these 6 groups that all have registries on our platform. This is an indication of how the data looks in the book. And this book is available. You can request a free digital copy on our website if you're interested in finding out more about this book. So these are a number of ways that the data is currently being used, and I'll talk about insight. So again, the URL for the registry is insight.imr.org, and this is what the landing page looks like. And I want to give a shout out to the banner that you guys came up with. I think it's one of the nicest ones I've seen. You'll see there's a green register button right here, and there's also all sorts of more information that you can learn about this. So again, this was a collaboration between Ocular Insight and UCSF, Brooklyn Eye Center, and NORD. And the registry was launched on June 22nd. We finally finished all of the building was built on that day. And again, we've already spoken about this, that it's collecting data on all of these different subjects, and our principal investigator is Melody. We very own Melody Burchett, and Amin is the co-investigator. And I do want to also reiterate that we do hope that you will enter data and share your data, but you can also opt in to be contacted about clinical trial information. And if you do select that, if a researcher comes to Ocular Insight with clinical trial opportunity, we will not share your data. We will share the researcher's data with you. So your privacy is always protected. And this is a quick snapshot. You guys ran out of the gate pretty quickly right from the start. We had 116 accounts created in June, and again, it was June 22nd, so that was a little over a week that you had to enroll 100 participants with 300 surveys. We added a few more in July and August and September, a little bit more. As of the end of September, we had 156 surveys have been submitted. So we hope, if any of you on the call today have already joined, we thank you very much. And if you haven't, we would like to very much encourage you to come and share your data. And again, Insight is the sponsor of this registry, so for specific questions about the registry, you can email Insight registry@ocularmelanoma.org, and this information is also available on the registry. And if you're interested in more about NORD, our website is rarediseases.org. And this is a quick snapshot. NORD actually has a Rare Summit that's just wrapping up today, overlapping with all these virtual events. But the Rare Impact Awards are going to be broadcast tonight. It's a virtual event this year as well. And if any of you are interested, it starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it's probably not too late to register. It's free to register. So every year, NORD awards various people in the rare disease space. Some of the awards go to individuals, some of them go to industry or organizations. And you can find out who won what tonight, or you can just read more about it on our website. And that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. We're now going to move on to Dr. Sacco's presentation and then finish it off with a quick Q&A. We're a little bit behind time, so we should only take a couple questions, but Dr. Sacco, over to you.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me. Can you see my full screen? Not quite yet. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk this evening. I have to be careful not to recapitulate much or to repeat much of what you've already heard. So I'll try to focus specifically on what we're doing. So this is an effort that's been led by Richard Carvajal at Columbia in the US, Anthony Joshua in Australia, in Sydney, and myself here in the UK. And we sort of came together through the International Rare Cancer Initiative, a UM group, which meets sort of annually at ASCO. We're all medical oncologists, and that's been our bias, which you will see in mostly in our focus. So being, one of the, I think the big frustrations is how difficult it is to advance patient care in a rare disease, because it's very difficult to run trials that are powered and that manage to recruit patients in order to actually identify therapies or strategies that help patients. So quite a lot of gaps exist in terms of how we manage uveal melanoma and its natural history as such. So these encompass all the way from epidemiology all the way to management of advanced disease, including risk stratification and surveillance strategies, for example. And actually, it was trying to devise a trial for surveillance that really got me down the route of thinking of a registry, because we really struggled to get funding and any trial that would actually deliver results. So we then sort of met up in ASCO a couple of times and over the years, and have started forming our ideas around a registry that would fit alongside clinical trials, but would use real-world data that would be able to augment the existing data from clinical trials, and therefore make us more, hopefully, a faster route to development of drugs, etc. So just in terms of our specific aims, firstly, is to document clinical outcomes of patients with uveal melanoma, and then to adjust for known prognostic risk factors and baseline demographic and clinical factors. And this was to provide benchmark endpoints, that is to know what outcomes would be for a specific group of patients. And then to use that to provide synthetic control arms, so that single-arm trials, for example, could actually be more informative and hopefully help with the development of drugs. Our second aim was to inform sort of outstanding questions that we felt were very unlikely to be answered by, even with well-designed prospective clinical trials around risk stratification, radiographic surveillance, and things such as decisions between liver-directed or systemic therapies or sequencing of treatments because of rarity and the need for long-term surveillance, for long-term follow-up. But one of the key angles to this is that actually by having international registry covering very different practices in different countries, we'd be able to compare the outcomes with different approaches. And then finally was to develop a virtual uveal melanoma tumor repository. And we all know that we're in an age of real movement in terms of understanding how cancers develop, what makes them develop, what makes them worse, what makes them spread, and give us clues as to how we can target them in future. But with a rare cancer, it is often difficult to get samples that are correct or that fit specific research. And by having a process where we can people can donate their tissue, even if there isn't an existing project, we can then match investigators with tissue to enable them to investigate their questions. So the study has a steering committee that was set up with Rich, Anthony, and myself. And then we have administrative and scientific advisory panels. Our funding has been from Immunocore so far, who have given us the funding to get going. And then that has funded our collaboration with Pulse Infraframe, who provide a data platform for the entry of data. This then feeds into the national coordinating sites in Liverpool, in the UK, Colombia in the US, and the MASC in Australia, and then a number of other sites within each of these countries that are going to contribute data. So it has been a long gestation, particularly with the coordination between multiple different countries, but the database has been built and is live, and we have an initial contract in place with Colombia, and in final stages of negotiation with other hubs. We're open to recruitment in Colombia, and hopefully we'll be opening the UK and Australian hubs in the next couple of months, with the remaining sites by the end of the first quarter of next year. This is just a snapshot of our Pulse Infraframe landing page, the dashboard, which just shows the number of patients, for example, that have been signed on. You can see 105 in this case at Columbia. And then it's tracking treatments for patients, for example, in this view, at different time points following initial treatment. We're then looking for much more granularity in terms of treatments that were given, and the stratifying features at the beginning, responses, etc. There's a whole, it's a very big database that we have, and I won't go into that in depth in this setting. But essentially, our plan is to recruit at least 400 people per annum, and initially, we anticipate that this will be predominantly patients with metastatic disease where the need is the greatest. But our ultimate aim is really continual recruitment and long-term follow-up. This is very dependent on funding. At the moment, we have this for 2 years, so it will be vital for us to secure further funding. Our medium to long-term goals are firstly to input retrospective data sets. So a number of investigators on the study have already set up smaller registries or collections of data in institutions, which we will be hoping to port onto the platform to sort of maximize early output. We have also had agreement to input the data from the Puma meta-analysis onto the system, and this is a big collaboration that pulled together a lot of smaller trials to see to benchmark survival in them. Our real key goal is secure further funding through industry and academic partnerships, and hopefully this will also allow us to expand the number of sites so that we can get more data faster. And ultimately, we really do want to have integration and crosstalk with other registries, which include your own, the MRF QROM. There's a French national registry led by Sophie Pepin-Neumann, for example. There's a COG2 registry led by Bill Harbour, and there are others. And I think it's really amazing that just how much activity there is in this field, in which we use to get data, to share data, and to move the needle in terms of treatments. So in terms of data sharing and usage, the data ownership will be retained by the host institution and then shared with the registry. So we'll have co-use agreements in each case. Clear publication policies, obviously core, reflecting contribution towards the registry. And just to say that Immunocore will not own the data or determine publication despite their funding, but will be allowed access to the data to support regulatory submissions. As you may know, they have a couple of studies and are, which, if positive, would lead to registration of a new agent, which is obviously what we're all hoping for in terms of treatment of metastatic disease. But we also want to invite other pharma companies to allow access to aggregate data. But hopefully this will be in return for contribution towards running of the registry, so we can ensure this for the future. So that was all I have, and so I think we're going on to the questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sacco. I will be now inviting the rest of our speakers back onto stage. So I believe we only have time for a question or two. Thankfully, Dr. Afshar saved us some time by answering some people's questions in the chat. Thank you for that. So let's get to some that we might have missed. So let's see, Deborah asks, is it standard for a patient to be in a registry?
We could probably all answer that. I think, so I'll go because I've just jumped in. I think it should be standard to have that opportunity at least, rather than, there's obviously an issue of consent and people have their own ideas about their data. But we're talking about a rare disease, which is very difficult to gain information about. And so sharing data is going to be vital however we go forward. So I would love to see a situation where this is the case for everybody. I don't think that is at the moment, but that would be the dream.
Great, thank you so much. And then Val is asking, will Pharma also have access to patient information?
So I guess that goes back to me again, and the answer is no. So the data will be very clearly, the regulation is very clear that the data that would be used by Pharma is aggregate data. It won't be individual level data, and it won't be identifiable. So from our registry, at least, I can say that they won't be able to know the individual data contributing that data.
Got it.
Also, so just to add on, in terms of the ACIS Insight Registry, there is no involvement with Pharma, so there's no sharing of data with them.
Thank you. And then this was touched on in the chat, but if anyone has something to add, Nancy wants to know, how does the registry for ocular melanoma become an added benefit for patients with metastatic diseases? Or metastatic disease?
Well, so maybe I'll just start briefly and I'll turn it over to Dr. Damato to elaborate more. But in general, I think there is an unmet need for better characterization of patients who do have metastatic disease with regards to their features of their disease, how they're being treated, are they enrolled in clinical trials, and in terms of their quality of life. And so I know that Dr. Damato's group in England has done extensive work characterizing thousands of patients through their registry data, and perhaps he has more to elaborate on that specific point.
Yes, you need lots of patients in order to test lots of risk factors and predictors for metastasis. But I'd like to make a comment about with regards to the previous question about whether all patients should be in a registry. In the United States and in Britain, all cataract patients are in a registry so that the results are analyzed and the results of every surgeon are compared with those of all other surgeons. And if there's any particular shortcoming in any particular hospital, or if a surgeon is getting too many recurrences or anything like that, then something can be done about it. And I have a feeling that we should be doing the same as with cataract surgery to improve the standards across the country.
Thank you. Eileen asks, will these registries hurt us due to pre-existing and even life insurance being unavailable? I guess she means due to pre-existing conditions, will registries affect life insurance in any way?
So that's an excellent question. The registry that we have is, at least ACIS's Insight Registry is purely confidential. There is no information that's shared with insurance companies or other entities. Definitely it's a secure platform, and it's an important question to ask, but there shouldn't be any risk of that.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. I don't see any other questions just yet on the chat, but if you're watching this and you think of one just a minute too late and can't get it in there, I encourage you to either find these speakers somewhere in the platform. Will be open for the next hour to be able to hop around. Or via the Socio app. Melody says there is a question.
Yeah, can I speak to that?
Yes, of course.
The question is, can there be too many registries? Do we need more than one? Why do we need more than one? I think that there's so many different questions to answer that the more registries, the better, within reason. And different registries can complement each other because different people have different priorities, different interests. And so I think it's good when there's more than one registry.
Thank you. And I did not catch that. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I agree. I think that, but I think what's key is that we need people who talk to each other and can use, who we can share our experience and that we're willing to collaborate. And I think that's the important thing. And then actually that will amplify the power of any registry if there is the ability to look at this question in a different registry or some kind of collaborative effort.
Thank you. And then our last question we're going to close with, Melody wants to know, why do we want patient-reported outcomes?
We want patient-reported outcomes so that we can understand our patients, so that we don't just treat the tumor, we treat the patient holistically, and the families too. And patients don't just want to know what's going to happen to their eye, they want to know how they're going to feel afterwards. And so we can identify perhaps patients who are going to get into trouble and prevent problems before they happen.
Does anyone have anything to add to that? Kristin, you might have.
Yeah, so the patient experience is really important, and a clinician might not even think to ask some of the questions. Some of our groups have found certain trends in our patient populations that would not have come out of just a clinical registry.
Great, thank you. And then I lied, we're gonna have one final question. And that is, why is my information important as a patient? And anyone can hop in. You'll all get the chance to, answer if you feel like doing so.
Well, I guess I can start off. Just the nature of the disorder, ocular melanoma is rare, and so every patient's experience is unique, and their information is invaluable in being able to better characterize the disease and what it's like to go through the process of treatment, and in order to help advance therapeutics and clinical trials going forward. So.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's
right.
very true. We all, very much rely, as clinicians, this is how we find experience in order to change our management, to get new treatments, to be, we don't, I certainly in my practice see individuals rather than, a whole number of people, and that's how, as humans, we experience life and data in general. But it is the aggregation of many people's experience to understand what is similar and what is different that then allows us to actually synthesize an overall narrative of the disease, and allows us these insights that will then determine what is different from one person to another. If it's all exactly the same, you can't identify sort of specific stratifiers or things that you can work with. But because everybody's different, we can start understanding the nuances of the disease.
Well, thank you. Thank all of you for that insight. And we're going to move on to a break and some closing remarks, and then the platform will be open. So if the four of you feel like staying on, and if there's any attendees that have further questions, we encourage that. So with that, I will thank you all again, and we'll be moving the five of us out of presenter mode. So thank you.